Hey guys, when you're going to pick a dog trainer, you're going to find out a whole lot about labels. And there's one thing that we really tend to do as a species is we like to label things and we like to put things in neat little boxes. And unfortunately, dog training is suffering because of it. You can start looking up trainers, you might see words like balance training or positive training. Sometimes you might see positive only training. And you might see people complaining about, oh, these people use fear and these people use bribes and blah, 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 blah. Ignore all of that. Ignore it. What we're really talking about is where people are on a continuum, right? Over here, we have the people who don't believe in any kind of correction to the dog at all. And over here, we have people who don't believe that, for example, dogs should be given any leeway or should be. I have met people who have said that failure to correct a dog immediately after not responding to a command is abusive. They didn't say it was bad training. They didn't say it teaches the dog a bad lesson. They said it's abusive. You are literally abusing the dog by not punishing them soon enough. On the other end, I have seen people who say it is abusive to say no to a dog, to tell a dog they made a mistake. It constitutes abuse. And if you agree with either of those statements, I'm not going to be the guy you want to work with. Okay, but I think it's a very few. There are very few people who do agree with those statements. Most of us exist somewhere along this line, and that's the problem because you've got to figure out where you are along that line to figure out what kind of trainer you want to work with. And for example, I fit into the balanced camp by most people's definition of balance because I will use physical compulsion. It's not very common. It's not my number one thing to do. I try to avoid it when possible. I work the like I I don't like to rely on that. That to me is like every once in a while. My goal is I want to build a dog who wants to work. I want the training to be fun. I want the training to be engaging. I want the dog to go, yes, I really like playing this game with you. I like sitting. It's fun. So sometimes you go, but I don't feel like playing the game right now. And I go, yeah, I know that sucks, but you kind of have to, right? That's the way I like. That's where I find a little bit of compulsion is valuable, right? When we've already taught the dog that he wants to do it, that it's fun, but he doesn't feel like doing it. I think a good example is I love what I do for a living. I get to train dogs for a living. I've got very little to complain about, but that does not mean that every day when I wake up, I go, I can't wait to train dogs today. Some days I just want to lay in bed or sit on the couch and watch Netflix. Some days I don't want to do the work. Some days I like the work, but I maybe have a dog that frustrates me or I struggle with, right? Some days being at work isn't my ideal, but I still get up and do it. But you know what? Here's the thing. My worst day at work is better than the best day at work for somebody who hates their job, right? And so when I'm training a dog, I want that same experience. His worst day doing obedience for me, I want it to be better than the best day for a dog who hates doing obedience. That's what I'm looking for. But that because I'm willing to say, hey, you have to, that puts me in the balanced camp by some people. But that puts me in the same camp as this guy who says, if you don't immediately punish a dog for not obeying to a command, you are abusing them. And I don't agree with that. I don't belong in the same grouping as that guy, right? And I also don't belong in the same grouping as the person who says, if you ever say no to a dog, you're abusive, right? But I am closer to this person than this person. But this camp, the positive camp, won't necessarily agree with me that I'm more positive. Like a lot of them, oh, again, at the extremes, at the fringes, if you ever use a leash to correct a dog or you ever raise your voice or any kind of physical or whatever, social punishments, even, they think that you're doing something wrong. And so they don't necessarily welcome me in their group, and that's fine. I'm not looking to be a joiner, but the thing is though neither of those labels is comfortable for me, right? So if I'm balanced, then that gives me allies I don't want, and you know a lot of enemies in this space that I don't want, and so I don't want enemies. Like that's not what I'm here for. So you got to figure out where you fit in that. How do you feel about using food? How do you feel about corrections? Are they sometimes okay? Or are they never okay? In what circumstances would they be okay? And does it matter on the intensity? Does it matter on how the dog is prepped for the correction? Does the dog know how to avoid the correction? Like, these are things you need to be thinking about. Like, it's never black and white, and that's the problem. The marketing wants you to think it's black and white. The big lie is that you have to choose a system. You have to choose a philosophy, and if you get that wrong, you will screw your dog up. The argument is the balanced trainers say, oh, positive trainers can't solve behavior problems, and they put a lot of dogs to sleep because they recommend euthanasia all the time because they can't solve behavior problems with cookies, right? And then there's other people who say, oh, the balanced trainers are just teaching the dogs through fear and pain, and you will never get a reliable dog if you're having to threaten them to obey. And the problem is neither of those statements are true. Not for the vast majority of the people practicing. Listen, you cannot tell how good a trainer is or how effective they are by the label they give themselves or the label or the camp they subscribe to. You can't. There are wonderful people, wonderful trainers. I have wonderful friends on the positive side of things who are great trainers. So many of them are better than me. And I know great trainers in the balance community. Again, many of them better than me. But I also know hack trainers on this side of the camp, and I know hack trainers on this side of the camp. Trying to decide how good somebody is as a trainer based on what camp they tell you they belong to is like trying to decide whether somebody is a good person by asking them what religion or philosophy they believe. Just because they believe it, just because they profess it, doesn't mean they're good at implementing it. Doesn't mean they live it all the time. Doesn't mean anything. It means this is my ideal idea, but I might be a terrible human being. Training is a skill. Yes, that skill should be informed by your philosophy. For sure, you should have a clear idea of who you are as a trainer and what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, and the ways you prefer to get there. But if you just have the philosophy but not the skill, you're not going to be an effective trainer. It doesn't matter how good your philosophy is, you don't have the skill to translate that into a change in the dog's behavior, you're no good. Like, that's the ultimate thing. And either way, doesn't matter how strong your belief is in balance or strong your belief is in the positive movement. If you do not produce results, you are not a good trainer. So these labels do not help us decide whether a trainer is good or not. What they can do is give us a starting point about who we want to talk to and who we want to listen to. But again, I prefer to talk to the trainer about where they actually fit on this continuum between punish immediately and never punish. Where do we fit on there? That's what we need to know, right? So don't stress too much about those labels. They can give you a good starting point. But most of the best trainers I know live somewhere in this area, somewhere in the middle. You talk to them, and we use a lot. Actually, probably more like over here. We use a lot of reinforcement. They want to build the dog up. They want to get the dog motivated. They want that dog to have a good day doing obedience, right? But whether or not they'll say, "Hey, I know you don't want to, but you have to." That's where when they get to that point, if they get to that point, and when they get to that point, and how they do that. That's what we need to know. That's where the real importance lies. So there was a questionnaire that was going around a few years ago, and I only had one person call me from it, but it was a list of questions you should ask a dog trainer, and it was being pushed in the positive community quite a bit. And the questions, I don't remember all the questions, but one of the questions is, what do you do if the dog gets it wrong, right? And like, is there an answer for that? Like, to me, it's like, well, it depends. Why do you get it wrong? Generally, I'm going to assume it's because I either failed to teach him or failed to motivate him, or there's some biological impediment to him doing it, like he physically is struggling to do it. That's where I come from. But I don't know. Like, I don't have a set answer, right? Sometimes I teach it again. Sometimes I change my reinforcement schedule. Sometimes I like those. I don't like questions like that. I prefer to have a conversation. Like, instead of what do you do when the dog gets it wrong, they're like, what is your philosophy about teaching? What is your philosophy about fixing dogs' mistakes? How do you view that? Right? So I'd rather have a conversation rather than a list of questions. But that's really where the disagreements lie. How do we teach? Do we use food? Do we use lures? How do we teach? How do we ensure that the dog knows what they're doing? How do we proof against distractions? How do we make the dog reliable when he doesn't want to be reliable? When the environment is conspiring against them? How do we get a dog stronger in the face of temptation? Like, those are the things you want to ask, because that's where the differences are going to show up. Like, there is no one great way to train dogs. Like I said in the last video, you don't have to work with anybody who doesn't fit your own value system, because you can find a good trainer who works in a way that you feel good about, right? But you got to know what that is, and you got to give them a chance to explain it. I don't like, sort of formulate questions for that. Let's have the conversation. All right, so I hope that helps. I hope it doesn't confuse you more. Let me know if you have any questions about picking a dog trainer that you want to use. Put them in the comments, uh, and I'll try to get to them in my next video. But I got some more stuff coming along this lines. All right, so that's it for now, guys. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.